Hello indie game fans, new game releases are beginning to pick up steam after the holiday lull, with some promising titles and the first big indie game of the year, so let's begin with Call of Sentinels, a stylish roguelite bullet heaven title but in a medieval fantasy setting, in which various heroes take on all sorts of enemies using their special abilities. Weirdly enough, the Steam page has no mention of it being a roguelite, but the trailer opens with
fresh take on the roguelike genre.
So I don't know why they are shying away from it, but it has proper boss fights and a story, so it's somewhat of an advancement of the concept. We also have the release of Zombie Party, not to be confused with Zombie Party from 2016, in which this is a pixel art action strategy title in which you play as a character named Gravedigger with the ability to summon zombies, telling an anti-establishment narrative as our protagonist seeks to overthrow the government, which is governed by the Parliament of Five, which should be the 5 characters that show up at the start of this trailer. This appears to be similar to the Infectonator games, in which you are summoning zombies and using them to overrun enemy installations, in which timing the use of special abilities or the spawning in of zombies will be critical to your success. And of course, I cannot resist, since the store page does talk about using the power of
chaos
to overwhelm your enemies, having meta progression in base building and upgrade modules as well. Are you ready for something pretty messed up? Angel at Dusk might be technically not safe for work, so I've cut out bits of the trailer with questionable imagery, in which this is a shoot 'em up title with an almost HR Geiger style body horror to the designs of the enemies, of fleshy abominations, of way too many eyeballs, tentacles, tumors, and more, being an intense bullet hell title. Set in the year 2.3 billion AD, Earth is now a paradise for angels, but the sun has begun to expand, which might signal the end of the universe, with this rewarding risky play by rewarding you the closer you get to enemies, and just looks like a lot. Hey, if you made it this far, subscribe to my weekly newsletter to keep on top of all things indie games, link in the description below. Here's a smaller game that you might not have considered, since I was intrigued by the opening shot of Searching for Rest, since it kind of looks like a memory game interface with the gravestone tiles, but then it reveals itself to be a roguelite deck builder RPG, but I'm just glad it's not another Slay the Spire clone. Not too many details are given with regards to the system and how it works, but the gist is that you play as a soul who is unable to be put to rest, having to destroy your enemies in order to find peace, with strategizing around the builds looking fun, and is your hidden gem of the week. I'm not familiar with the original Buried Bones, but that appears to be a free-to-play title that has its fans both on Steam and mobile, being a turn-based dungeon crawling RPG, with the sequel Buried Bones 2 Dungeon RPG being the title of interest here. While this trailer is Japanese only, it will have English language support based on screenshots, set in a world besieged by an ancient overlord who commands an army of the undead, in which you can defeat and acquire their corpses and then alter and possess their souls. Looking pretty impressive, although of course, I'm pretty concerned about the microtransactions. This next title is on the smaller games portion of the video, not because I don't think it will be popular, but more of the fact that these first-person sims seem to come out of nowhere and just blow up in popularity, but are not really my thing. But at least Computer Repair Shop should be from a more independent developer who is self-publishing, rather than the grey goo that is Playway SA and its associated companies, with this developer's previous titles, Internet Cafe Simulator and its sequel, being very popular, with this new title looking to follow in those footsteps. Here's another Bullet Heaven title but with a twist, since Noxious Weeds is essentially Bullet Heaven Atomic Crops, adding in a farming element to the popular subgenre, in which you are defeating monsters and corrupting forces that are poisoning your harvest. The farming theme and crossover does have interesting implications, such as having cute veggie companions to help out, so again, it's something different which makes it of interest. We also have the Steam and Switch release of Reign's Three Kingdoms, a game that uses the same card swiping mechanism that made the original very popular, since you had to make decisions and attempt to keep the 4 meters full, otherwise it's game over. I thought that this was out, and indeed it was, but on mobile only, where this game was in Netflix's Vortex under their gaming services, but exclusivity has expired and is now coming to other platforms, with this game being the first in the series to have online ranked card battles, which I was not expecting. A perhaps not so indie title is War Hospital, coming to us from a Polish developer, being a World War I real-time strategy game but with a twist, since you are managing a field hospital and are commanding the medical corps instead of soldiers. Combat medics are still soldiers near the front lines of war, so there's that to consider, but the main objective here is about saving lives and not taking them, which is a clever inversion of video game norms. As such, it's different enough to be of note and has good momentum leading up to the release. Here's quite the curiosity for the week in Archelund, a first-person open-world RPG in which you're exploring this fantasy world, but then comes the twist that combat switches to turn-based on a grid, which I was certainly not expecting. Yes, it's a full-fledged party-based CRPG in a fantasy world, think Baldur's Gate for example, but the decision to bring the camera down into first person during exploration is an interesting idea, where I do wonder how that will affect the larger design of the game. If you're an indie developer and have no idea how to start with marketing your game, get on my mailing list via the link in the description below, where I'll send you some free templates and guides soon. Here's an interesting roguelite deck builder in Primateria as well, a combat-focused title that is more akin to Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering, with the developers specifically calling up the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game in particular. So if you're familiar, you know what to expect, but if you don't, it's a 1v1 combat-focused title in which you're attempting to deplete your opponent's health but can summon monsters to block incoming damage. As such, I like that it's not another Slay the Spire clone, but rather something different, having some interesting systems like infinite card fusion and a dual graveyard system, so even if this is not usually a thing, I would still give it a go. I've been looking forward to Crystal Story Dawn of Dusk for quite a while now, having previewed it in past editions of the best upcoming action-adventure games of the year, in which this pixel art title has an interesting visual style in addition to the Zelda-style action and even Earthbound inspiration. You play as Mina, a young adventurer from the Dawn side who has to venture into the Dusk side to find her long-lost brother who was kidnapped by a demon, mixing both real-time action and turn-based combat. Confusingly, there is another RPG series titled Crystal Story, which you can find on Steam as well, which I believe dates back to the Flash game era, so this game is not that, with Dawn of Dusk serving as the introduction and the first entry in what would hopefully be a series of games and looks promising. I've been banging on and on about this game, but in case you have not heard of it, Momodora Moonlit Farewell is the 5th entry in the Momodora series of action platformers, which comes after Reverie Under the Moonlight, but there is no requirement to have played the earlier games since they are all standalone stories, with our heroine being on a quest to save the village from demons in this case. The action in this looks awesome, with the previous entry having some Souls-like elements in the combat without directly having a stamina bar, so this should be quite the challenge as well, and it's the final entry in this series, but I believe the developer is still planning on making games, just not with this IP. If you love Metroidvanias, then you have to watch this video on 50 upcoming titles.